All right, Beverly. So we're doing this project for grad school, and it's going to be involving your budgeting and finance and a little bit about the Pregnancy Resource Center. This is Beverly, everyone, and I just want Beverly to tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us a little bit about the Pregnancy Resource Center, and then tell us how you got involved here at the center.
All right. Well, I was the founder and was the one. It was a God thing on how it got started. This really was not anything I've always been pro-life, but I never had even any idea that I would start a pregnancy resource center. It was not something that on my plan, but God it was through circumstances where I was called upon there was a college girl who was considering having an abortion. She was in a pregnancy crisis, and there were people around her, actually some coaches, that were very concerned and wanted to know what could they do to help. And they called me because I had been just barely involved with the Pregnancy Resource Center before, not very heavily involved. So they called me to find out what do they do. And one of the things I told them was they needed to get her to a Pregnancy Resource Center. They needed to intervene. They need to go to her and offer to help. It's a very long story, and I won't go into all the details, but through several months with them reaching out, working with her, and calling me off and on, she did decide to parent the child. Baby was saved, and it ended up being a really neat success story. Through that, I knew God was calling me to get a center open here in our town, Arkadelphia, because we have 2 universities, and we did not have a pregnancy resource center. So I knew every day that there were young women and men right here in our very town who were facing that decision and nowhere to go for help. About 15 years or 10 years before that time, there had been a pregnancy resource center here that a center in another large city nearby came over and tried to start a branch.
Okay.
And it didn't make a go of it. The community would not support it. And again, that was my reason for having the community meetings, to see if at this point the community would be behind it. Because that had happened before, where there had been a center that opened and closed, one of the first decisions that the board made was that we would not open until we had a year's operating expenses in the bank.
Wow.
So we had to do a projected budget early on about what was it going to cost to operate a center. Well, we were going to be very, very careful. We couldn't be extravagant on rent or anything like that. We did include the salary for a director, and so we had to kind of project, because at that point we didn't have a building, we didn't have a space, but we kind of projected what we felt like we needed to operate a center. So we began to work in that, and that goal was to get this much money open, get this much money raised and in the bank before we opened. Well, in let's see, we opened in August of 2013, and in September of 2012, we did a big fundraiser in the community. Did lots of advertising, lots of promotion, and we got it did not do what we wanted it to do. Honestly, we were disappointed. We raised some money, but not nearly what we had hoped. We had been in this process for 2 years of all the foundational, getting a 501c3, doing. You had the articles of incorporation, bylaws, all those legal things. We had been doing all that in the process, making community aware, fundraising. But we got to this point where it had been 2 years that we'd been saying, we're going to do this, we're going to open this center, and we thought that fundraiser would put us over the hump and do it, and it just didn't. So as a board, we had to sit down and we had to say, well, the board said, we've got to do this. We got to open. We've been telling the community we're going to do it. People have given money. And so they looked at me and they asked me to consider to be the director as a volunteer. And so I prayed about it, and I said yes. Not really knowing what I was saying yes to, because I had not really ever done anything like that. But I said yes, I would do it. So in January of 2013, we found this little building where we are now. We had to do lots of remodeling. I was the director. and we were operating all with volunteers, totally volunteers. We did a lot of remodeling. Because we were working with volunteers even on the remodeling, it wasn't until August of that year that we were able actually to have our first day.
So Beverly, switching gears now, I do want to speak about how you kind of budget for the Pregnancy Resource Center. Also, I want to talk about maybe a strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. Can you give me a little bit of information about how you fund? Well, we'll talk about fundraising in a minute, but tell me, how much of your donations come from a private person? How much would you say, roughly?
90% comes
90%.
from churches or
Okay.
individuals. We do some grant writing,
Okay.
but that is not a big part of our budget. I know there's larger grants out there, but most of ours and our $2,000-3,000 grants, they're not big,
Okay.
but and we usually use those for something that have to be in particular, like diapers or something specific. But most of our donations come from individuals and churches. Now we have about 10 churches that have put us on their monthly budget, and we get a certain amount from them every month, which is wonderful. We do have some individuals that are monthly. Every month they're faithful to give us a certain amount. We are getting ready to do a I don't really call it a campaign, but a development plan where we're going to try to increase those monthly givers, because that's really what you can plan on when you have people who are giving monthly and you know what's coming in. The way we have done our budget is we look back at the previous year, obviously, and see what did we spend, what did we spend it on, and where would there be an increase? Is there something this next year? Like we just in January we looked back at 2018, and then we looked ahead at 2019, and we have always, even when I was a volunteer as a director, we've always budgeted for a director because we knew realistically, I mean, it's very unusual that a nonprofit doesn't pay a director. That's very unusual. And so we always put that in the budget, and we would look at our budget with the director's salary in there and without, because there was those years when we didn't have to pay it. But we wanted to know if it was in there, could we meet it? If a director came along and we wanted to hire her, would we be able to do it? So we always put that in there. So we would just look at, and if we had something new coming up, like we knew maybe it was computers or there was something bigger that was coming, we would budget for that. So we just looked at what did we spend the year before, what's coming up next year, do we have anything, and then we would budget for that. We have 2 accountants on our board. We're very fortunate at that, and we also have an outside accountant who does. We're not big enough to do a full-blown audit, but we do an accounting review every year, and an outside accountant does that review of our accounting every year, and we have that report. So that's how we budget. But the next big thing that we really are looking for is we need more room. We're in a very, very small building. It has suited us well. The location's great. We're very visible, but we need more space. And so we are looking for that building, and so that will be something, but we don't have it yet. If we find that place, and then once we know, is it something we're going to buy, or is it something we're going to rent? Then we would be able to budget, and then we probably would do a building campaign where we would go out and say, the pregnancy center is wanting to move into this building. A lot of times you will get people to give towards something like that when they wouldn't give otherwise, because it's something very tangible and something that they can see, and it's something that they know that we need. So that is, and the board, it presents that budget, and then they have to vote on it. Each
and that's
year.
kind of how it's passed to make sure that we've got a budget in place.
And we look at each year, when we get down to the end of the year, did we budget appropriately? Did we allow enough for this item? Then we need to do more, or maybe we allowed more than we spent. And so we look at every line item on that budget. We look at each year and see, how did we actually come out at the end of the year in our actual expenses. And then as the director, I have to look at that too, particularly like in marketing. How much do we allow for marketing each year? Well, I need to look at that budget. If I'm say I want to do put an ad in a newspaper or ad in a magazine or whatever it might be, depending on what the cost. I have to look at the budget that the board's given me for the year to say, well, can I really afford that? Is it going to stay within my budget?
Right.
So the budget is a wonderful thing because it gives guidance to the director and what our expenses should be, and we need to stay within that.
Perfect.
And so
budgets
now,
are important. We've
yes,
learned.
they are. Now, as far as the planning, in 2017 we did a 5-year strategic plan.
Okay.
And I've given you a copy of that. And in there are a lot of things. One of the things is the building. That's certainly in there. But there's things in related to, one of the things we would love to have once we have a building, we have space, is to have our own ultrasound and have a nurse on staff who would do ultrasounds for us. Right now we go to the OBGYN's office and that works okay for now, but that's a goal that we would have. A lot of pregnancy resource centers have their own ultrasound equipment and a nurse to do that. So that's in there. A lot of training that the board would get. We put things related to board, related to volunteers, related to staff, client services. So the strategic plan covers a lot of areas of the, but we did that. It was a lot of work to sit down and look at all those areas, and we put that, and the board adopted that in 2017. So we have and each year we're supposed to look at that. Like we have looked at that. There have been some things on there we've looked at and said, this wasn't realistic, and we've changed them.
Okay.
So the board has to look at that strategic plan every year. And some of it we've already done. It was in our plan and we did it. But then there's other things that we've got. That was 2017. Here we are, 2019. 2 years later, we look and we thought, well, that wasn't really realistic. So we're going to adjust that goal.
Perfect.
And so that's kind of what. But we did do that. We have done some planning.
So Beverly, now that we've kind of heard about your strategic planning and kind of your line item budgeting, funding, how do you fund a pregnancy resource? And I know you said a lot about private donations, churches. Is there anything specific that you do to, keep the center afloat?
We do. We from one of the first fundraisers, and this is very common to pregnancy resource centers. It's not something probably other nonprofits would do, but it's called a baby bottle fundraiser. And we go out into the churches once a year, and these baby bottles are made for this. They're not for feeding babies, but they're for putting money in. And we distribute baby bottles. They take them, they put their money, change, dollars, checks. We even can take credit card. And in those bottles, and then they bring them back in and we count it. It's a fun thing to do. Children can get involved. Churches like it. They love having a baby bottle, and it's just a great fundraiser. And I think every pregnancy center in the United States probably does this. It's just very common to us. And so we've done that. It's been very successful. We have done other things like a 5K race. We did 2 of those 2 years in a row. Everybody does a race now, and so the last year it wasn't a great success. Another big fundraiser for pregnancy centers is what they call a gala or a banquet. We are fairly new, since we've only been open 5 years. This is our 6th year. We have not done a banquet. I think we're to the point we could do that. But a lot of centers that are well established, that's an annual thing they do every year. They invite people to come. They usually have a speaker, and then people make a commitment. Either they give a donation or they make a year commitment at that banquet. So that's another. A lot of people, they can do a race, do a run. There's golf tournaments that centers do. Those are kind of some of the fundraisers that pregnancy resource centers do. But right now, the baby bottle fundraiser is our big one. That's
the biggest thing that you guys do.
We actually do it throughout the year. Because we schedule the churches out, because it's an opportunity to go into the church and speak, let them hear from us, hear what we're doing, what's going on, and it strengthens that relationship. So we schedule them throughout the year whenever it's good for them to come. So it's a throughout the year fundraiser.
Oh wow! So a yearly thing that you guys are doing to kind of bring in those funds to get the center going. So it's every Sunday that you guys are going to churches, and what do you guys do when you guys go to the church? Do you? Yeah. Well,
Okay.
Mom, this is my mother Joanne, and she's gonna tell us a little bit about the fundraising process. She's actually the one visiting the churches. So Mom, tell us, what do you do when you go to these churches?
Well, I have a routine that I do. The first thing I do is I call the church and I let them know that I'm coming and that I'll be visiting their church. And when I get there, I usually have the administrator there just to kind of show me around. And I look at the pulpit to make sure, at the altar, make sure there's a pulpit there where I can put my little script where I'm going to be talking about. And then I look at the access of the door. I ask how many members or how many attendants they have on Sunday. They give me a number. I write all that information down. I give them my cell phone number and then the contact person or the person that I'll be meeting on Sunday when I arrive with all the baby bottles.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the big churches, they have as many as 300 to 400 members, and so I have to get ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
I also bring with me the bulletin inserts, and they put them in their bulletin inserts on Sunday, and they can volunteer there if they want to. They can help with anything that we need here at the center, and they can fill those out and give them back to me, so I take those with me. Once I do that, I come back to the center, and we have baby bags, and they're full of bottles, and so we just count them out. We count them out. We make a note in a book that we have, a 3-ring binder that we had put together with all the churches. We write how many bottles are going to the church, what day will be arriving, and an email to the pastor. Sometimes the pastors like to talk to me before I go. They want to know what I'll be talking about, what I'll be saying. And the reason they do that is depending on the day that I talk, if they have something going on at the church that they can do a message close to what I'm going to be speaking of, they do that. So if they have a story that matches the center, the pastor will do that. Sometimes pastors will tell me, Joanne, we only have 2 minutes, and so I have to prepare for 2 minutes. Sometimes they give me 10 minutes, and then I can go and take one of my volunteers to speak also on other ministries that we do. But there's a routine that I follow. Once I get there on Sunday, I set up. I have my volunteers at all the exit doors. As the members come out of the church, we hand them a baby bottle. We give them instructions at the pulpit. If they want to donate, they can do so with checks, chains, or through PayPal. And then the bottles that are not given out are brought back to the center, and then we count them. And then we give them 2 weeks to bring the money back. And then one of my volunteers has an Excel spreadsheet, and she keeps all the donations separated by church.
Oh, wow.
And that way they can get a receipt telling them exactly how much that church gave to us that year.
And individually they can get a receipt too.
And individually
each
too.
bottle
Oh,
has
wow.
a card where they can fill out a giving card if they want a receipt for their bottle.
Perfect.
Individual.
So starting back, Beverly, to the beginning of the center, have you seen an increase of amount of people that have been giving through this baby bottle fundraiser?
Oh yeah, when we first started we didn't have that many churches. We're up to 17 now. And we actually add, almost every year we add another church. We added one this year. But 3 years ago we had a big bump in giving. That year we had a story of a baby that was saved twice from abortion, which is kind of an unusual story. And so I tie that to, because when we go to the churches we always are telling a story about something, because that's what gets to people's hearts, and that's what they connect with, is that, what difference are we making in their lives?
Giving us insight on how a nonprofit is, run, and basically how you founded something out of nothing, and really how the community of Arkadelphia kind of rallied behind you, and they're continuing to do that. And thank you for letting us, see your budget and kind of just get an idea of how maybe one day in the future, if we're in nonprofit organizations, we could be able to benefit from this video. But thank you so much, Beverly. Thank you for your time.